All right, welcome back to part 2 of the marvelous 3D fluid container tutorial. Now, this is sort of where we left off in part 1, so make sure that if you're landing on this tutorial that you go back and watch part 1 so that you can get to this point, all right? So here we are. Now, this is where things get kind of strange. We know that we have heat emanating from our sphere down here, and we know that it's coming straight up, but what we want to do is we want to turn that into a flame, and we actually want to see this sort of represented as a flame rather than just these arrows. So here's where it gets a little tricky. We're going to go down and play around with the shader, and we're going to play around with some stuff in the shading section. And this is kind of critical to know, because what's happening right here is we can't see the flame because we can't really see it because we don't have our transparency and our color set correctly at the moment. So just bear with me. If things don't go right for you at this point, don't worry about it. You'll be able to come back here and take another look at this later on. But what we want to do is we want to set this transparency level to something like a deep gray. I might choose this gray right here. And we want to set the color to black. And so I'm going to just go ahead and set that color down to black. And I'm going to come down here and make sure that your incandescence is set on temperature, okay? We want temperature there because we're going to look at everything from a temperature standpoint. So here we go. Let's take a look and go back to the beginning and see what happened by resetting those values. I'm going to take velocity draw off at this point. So let's just get rid of that. I'll scroll up here and we'll just turn off velocity draw. All right. And I might want to hit 6 on the keyboard. Will put us into a shading mode. So I'll press 6 on the keyboard and I'm going to come down here. And when you're dealing with this stuff, you kind of want to be in your high quality rendering. Okay. I'm going to press high quality. And I'm going to just go ahead and take a playback from the beginning, and we'll see if we see anything. Well, I'm not really seeing anything, and I should be, so we have to look at this carefully and figure out kind of what's going on. You'll notice that you'll have your opacity level right here that you can mess with, and you'll notice that it was down by default all the way right there. And then when you bring it up, it starts to look, kind of gets, well, you can see what it's doing. So let's look at that for a second and maybe bring this level up just a little bit. And we'll go back and take another play on the beginning. And I'm just going to let this play out a little bit and see if I start to see, any kind of reaction in there. We're setting our shading values right now. And as you can see, the longer I let this play, I'm starting to see some heat build up here in the top. And, it has a lot to do with your levels over here and your opacity, and also getting the correct color and incandescent values. So I'm going to just hit escape, and we'll take a look at this real quick. I'm going to go ahead and bring this over and hit render. And you'll notice in a render it doesn't look too exciting. We just have some basic heat right there, so that's cool, but it's not quite what we want. So let's get rid of that for a second. And now we can kind of see where we can play around with our opacity levels here a little bit. And in this case, I'll bring this up and maybe bring this one down and just sort of play around with these a little bit and kind of find a good balance of what you want to see. In this case, I'm not getting much by just messing with it there, so I may want to look at what my input bias is and bring this back and forth a little bit, and it's not really doing much there. So let's come back up here and maybe look at our let's look at the transparency level right here and maybe switch that to a gray, a little bit lighter gray, and let's see what that, well, let's set it down to a little darker gray. Let's see what happens there. And let's also look at the color. It's at black, but we want to look at our input bias as well on there and see if it's actually affecting anything in there, which it's not right at the moment. So we'll just sort of leave it centered around there for a second. Now you'll notice your other option here is to play around with your ramp settings. Now you can notice right away we start to get some differences in our ramp settings when we set these in some different places here. So that's controlling something, which is kind of cool. So what we'll do is just maybe let's set it up here, kind of try and get something going. Okay. Now you'll notice that now if I set my input bias up a little bit more on this, we're starting to really get more stuff, which is kind of cool. I don't know if it's really where we want to be or not, but let's try bringing our opacity values and whacking those out a little bit. Okay, you'll notice that it's not doing all that much, except for when we start to get down here toward the bottom, and it may just disappear. Yeah, so I'm bringing my opacity levels are being affected like that. So that's one thing to look at. Now another thing we can look at right here is setting some points and doing some various things with our ramp. And if I click on this over here, it should give you a window that looks something like that. And that shows you your ramp. And if I click on this one, it's going to give us our opacity scale. So remember, on all of these you can do various things. You can add points, you can add opacity, you can put points in here in, say, the opacity scale, and bring, say, one end up and one end down and different points up or down. You know, you can mess around with your various opacity levels like that. At the moment they're not really doing very much. You know, you can see where I'm moving around some stuff there. What if I were to start bringing these levels up and mess around with them in a different way? Well, not too much going on there. Let's do this. Let's look at this for a second and add a point on our ramp. And let's just take that yellow to something more like a blue, like that, just for grins. And I'll take a quick render. And as you can see, you don't see much change. So, you know, in some cases we may need to analyze this in a little bit different way. We may need to up our level of our temperature. So I think that's what's going on here, is our overall temperature is set a little low. So, you know, we want to add a little bit more temperature. So go ahead and cruise on up here into your settings up here, and let's look under our contents method and make sure that our temperature is on. That's good. And you may want to come down, and we want to find in the contents details down here, we want to find properties for our temperature and our temperature scale. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and set our temperature scale up to, say, like 3, and just sort of see what happens. Well, right away you notice we got a big change. So, you know, we may want to go back to the very beginning of the simulation here and check it out and kind of try and isolate why we don't see something, you know, coming out of here early on. We see it when it hits the roof up here, but we're not seeing it when it stops in down there, like from the start. So let's come back down here, and usually it's just a whole bunch of fine-tuning between your opacity levels and your okay, you know what, here's why. And I found this is often the thing that you'll forget to do. As I'm showing you, I'm almost forgetting. On the opacity level here is you have a density right now. It's set, this opacity level is set for a density. But what we really want to do is set our opacity level for our temperature to make it consistent with everything. And now I should be able to vary these points a little bit more. Maybe bring it into the positive bias there. Maybe not. Maybe bring it in down there. Nope, not going to do it. Okay, let's bring this all the way down. All right. Well, now you can see where all of a sudden, just by, you know, sort of changing one thing on this curve, now I'm getting a whole nother, you know, I'm actually finding and fine-tuning the look of this fire, or this, you know, whatever. So that's cool. Now we can start making adjustments this way. and just sort of find out, maybe we want our input density to be down a little bit like this, our input bias. So, we might want it to look something like that. I mean, that doesn't look great or anything, but let's just go back and take a render from the beginning. You'll notice that now we have, a fire. It's cruising up, kind of looks like a burst going on. And if I do a quick render of this, I'm going to get something like that. And that doesn't look all that good. That's not really what we want. So we're going to fine tune it a little bit more from here. You might want to come in and let's look at this input bias for a second and just see what happens when we change that input bias. All right, it's going up and down. We could sort of give it a, we might leave it right there, for example. And then your incandescence, I'm also having an input bias over here, which is having an effect. So, you can see that by varying that, you're going to get a whole bunch of different results. So those are two things to look at in this shading section. And, that's something just to keep in mind. Also, up here in your transparency levels, you can also mess around with these a little bit. And those will give you even more control over your transparency levels once you get this kind of set up. And you kind of find the right level that you want. And, in this case, I'm not liking how this ramp is going all the way up here. So, I might want to mess around with this ramp over here and try and figure out how to minimize the blue area. And in this case, it may take going to the larger view by clicking on your, opening up this larger one here, and maybe just, shifting it all the way up to maybe the end. And, maybe messing with the input bias a little bit. Let's see, let's take this out of here and come down. And it's all about fine-tuning at this point. You could take your different levels of opacity levels from this reaction, changing it on your curve here, and just sort of move some of those around. You may want to bring one end all the way up, one end all the way down. In this case, I like the fall off. It kind of looks good. But really, you get the idea. It's all about playing around with these levels to get, kind of a look that you want. And in this case, it doesn't look all that great. I mean, we're just sort of getting a start, but it's kind of looking more like a flame here. And, that's kind of cool. Now, let's do this. Because it's blocking up on the roof right here, this is the top of the fluid container. Let's check out how to change that so that we can let those contents kind of just sort of fall off toward the top of there. You'll notice that in the top in your container properties, you have a boundary Y, and that's what that is up there. That's the Y boundary. So let's just take that off. Let's say negative Y. Okay. Now I'll have to play through this simulation again, and you'll notice that these flames, as they're starting to come up this way, are now sort of just falling off into the top of the frame there. And if I were to do a quick render, let's take a look at that. You'll see where it's sort of a flame. And right now I'm on Maya software render, and you can do this in Mental Ray or Maya. If I switch over to Mental Ray, you can see kind of what we're getting over here. A little bit cleaner. This kind of has like a blue glow to the flame when it comes up through here, but now it's just a matter of fine-tuning some various properties on this sort of fire effect. All right, so what we might want to do is come over and add some swirl or some velocity. So in this case, I'm going to come down here. My velocity is set to dynamic grid. I want to come down here into our contents details again and basically take a look at this velocity. Now this is sort of going straight up. It's just like a flame, a pure pillar of fire, and that's cool and all, but we want to make it swirl around a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and just up this swirl value in the velocity section here, and we'll go back to the beginning, and I'll take another render on it. And this time you'll notice that it sort of adds a little bit of, it adds some dimension. Now it looks like it's really on fire, and that's pretty cool because fire's cool. All right, so now we're getting the idea. It's sort of like adding a little bit of air in there and just swirling it around, and that flame is now, now it has some punch. Okay, and it looks somewhat more normal than where we were at before. And I'm going to go ahead and hit a render there, and you can see where it kind of looks a lot more real. So I like that. Let's stay with that. You can always add more in your temperature section. I believe in the contents details down here. Let's get to the temperature section. You can always increase or decrease the scale of your temperature. Right now, this is at 3. If I increase this to say like 4 now, you'll notice it gets a lot larger. And I think we'll vary this a little bit. We'll just do a quick playthrough. And once again, you're going to be doing a lot of play blasts and things like that. So anyway, that gives you kind of an idea of what's happening now. Now it's reaching all the way about to the top. Let's say I just want to control it inside of this area and I want to have some room on top to breathe there. You might want to bring the temperature scale down to say like 2. And go back beginning and take a render. And there you go. Okay, so essentially, I think we're getting somewhere. That looks pretty good. I may want to bring the ramp down on the blue or something like that, but you get the idea. That's kind of where we're at right now. Now, the next bit is we want to add some gasoline to this simulation because we want this fire to actually touch, some sort of touch off a reaction with some gas, or like let's just put a gallon of gas in here. Okay, so here's what we'll do. Select your fluid, and you may want to do this from the outliner. Most of the time I like to know that I'm getting my fluid right there, and that's cool because we want to tell Maya that we're going to make some changes to this container here. And what we want to do is come up into fluid effects, and we want to add edit contents. And in this case, we just want to have an emitter emit some basic gas. So we'll sort of like open that up, and you can give it a name and call it gas or whatever. But what you want to look for is the emitter type, and in this case, it's on volume. If you reset your settings, you're probably going to have a standard emitter that's going to be an omni by default, and you really want to switch that to volume for this because we want a volume emitter. And we're not messing around with density, so we'll just go ahead and give that a 0. We're not messing around with heat, so we'll just put that at 0. But what we are doing is we're messing around with fuel. So let's give that, like, say, a value of, instead of 1 by default, let's give it a value of 10. Okay, so we'll just give it some volume there. And essentially that should be it. The emitter type right now by default is set to cube. Let's turn that over into a sphere at this point when we create this emitter. And let's go with it at that. These are standard defaults are good. So I'm going to go ahead and hit apply and close. Now, as you can see, we now have our fluid emitter number 2. And this is going to be our gallon of gas. Okay, so I'm going to move out there. Let's get in here a little closer. You'll see there it is. And here it is in its tab, and everything looks good. So we're not going to do anything with the emitter in its tab right here at the moment. So no need to worry about that, but everything looks good. So I'm going to switch back to my fluid 1 shape, all of this fluid right here. And we're just going to basically take a play and see what happens. We'll go ahead and rewind to the beginning, and I'm going to bring this out here, and as you can see, when it gets to that fluid emitter, well, nothing's happening. Nothing's happening at all, and that's not unusual because It is emitting, and it is an emitter, but we haven't defined its properties yet by default. We've given it some preliminary starting points, but what we really want to do is fine-tune that. So I'm going to go over here and in my outliner choose that emitter, and that way I just have this emitter. And I'm going to move it down a little bit closer to the fire when it starts out here. So we'll go ahead and bring that down. And I'll sort of put it kind of right there, right above the emitter of the heat. So when this flame goes off, it'll touch off this gallon of gas, and we'll get an explosion, hopefully, that sort of, explodes out the sides. All right. So let's see what happens when we do that. What we have to do is we have to make sure that we're on our fluid 1 shape first, and come back up to the top and take a look at what we're doing here. You'll notice that we just set the temperature for dynamic grid, but now we also need to have fuel. So we need to activate a dynamic grid for our fuel as well. And that was the first problem of why we weren't really getting anything, happening there and on this emitter. So I'm going to come back here, and we'll just take another play from the beginning and see if we get anything, happening as of yet. Well, I'm not really seeing too much of a reaction. I'd like to see a lot more. There's a little bit of one there, but let's just figure out a way to increase that reaction that's happening with this fuel right here. I'll go ahead and let's come down to our set some properties for this in our contents details section once again. And you'll notice that this is a pretty important section, this content details, because it has all of the various properties we're working with here in terms of, fuel, temperature, and stuff. So right now, let's set these properties for, like, say, our reaction speed. You'll notice that right now by default it's at a really slow, there's no value hardly there whatsoever. So let's raise our reaction speed up to a good round number like 1. And our ignition temperature, let's set the ignition temperature to like 0.1. That's a pretty low temperature. And let's set a max temperature to, like, say 100. All right, and a heat released at 100 as well. Those are just 2 good starting default large numbers that give us some play either, up or down. And the light released is the amount of light that is thrown off of here. If you have this, you want to see this in, reflections and stuff like that, you can increase this light color. So just something to be aware of right now. Right now we'll just leave it at 0. Or actually, let's just give it a value of 1, okay? Just a good default value of 1, and that's cool. Okay, well now we should be able to see, a lot more going on if we go back and rewind to the beginning of the animation. And let's do a rewind there and actually hit play. And now I can see where there is a reaction going on there, but I don't really know if it's quite what I want. It's pretty extreme, but we can play with it here for a second. Let's just kind of go in and fine tune that. Let's see here. I had a couple other notes. Let's see. Let's play with the fuel scale here. Because that's our fuel right here. Let's take our scale up to, say, like 3 on the fuel scale. And now we'll take a play, and it's doing stuff, but it's not quite what I want. So it just is a matter of going back and let's see here. We just want to play around with almost all of our settings. And sort of maybe we need to move this emitter around. And this is what I'm talking about when when you are doing simulations like this. There's no way it's ever going to come out the same every time. And a lot of the times you need to sort of look at what's happening and move stuff around. Kind of see where each of your elements is at. I'm going to maybe just hit R or W on the keyboard and move this over here to a little bit to this side. And we'll sort of see if we can take a All right. I noticed that it's starting to take off there, but I could also play around with these properties of the emitter a little bit more. So, I might want to come up and start playing and fine tuning, some of this various, emitter stuff. Let's see. You could change your fuel voxel. At the moment, you just want to really sort of look at it logically. Like, what do you really want to do? Is there anything that we need to increase here on the emitter itself, or do you need to look in your fluid shape and analyze what things are going on in your fluid shape? In the fuel section, I could maybe set this ignition temperature down a little bit. Maybe go to a 0.050 and go back to the beginning, take a play, and see what happens. Right now it's not really doing what I expect it to do, but you get the idea. You're going to lock on to the right way to kind of come about getting a reaction. I'm going to move this up a little bit and maybe bring the scale down. In this case, I'll just move this emitter up to here. We'll try it up toward the top of the box. And you always got to reset your simulation, because that kind of lets things calculate through here. And technically, when these flames reach this, there should be an explosion, which there is, but let's see, we're still fine-tuning it. So in this case, I may want to bring this emitter all the way up to the top. And let's see if we can check that out. All right, and we'll start the simulation. And there it goes. And when those flames get kind of close to that object up there, okay, so there you can see it's starting to have an effect, but it's not really until it gets to the very top of the container up there. So I hope that gives you kind of an idea and a clue about where to go with this stuff. It's sort of a mastery of this this process, and you'll get the hang of it as you work with this a little bit more. But essentially those are the right ingredients to get you some really cool fire effects and some smoke and some other stuff. Now, this is pretty much just dealing with creating a reaction, a fire, fuel, temperature kind of reaction within a 3D fluid container. But remember that this can also be used as a concept for, other types of effects, like plasmatic effects and whatnot. So it's all about your imagination and what you can think about doing with this. Okay? So, wow. I think we got it all in. Let me show you a couple of little things that have to do with rendering. Of course, the higher you set your render settings in mental ray as you go into production settings and whatnot are really good. You'll get a much better look. Remember that you can change your resolution when you finally get to what you want. Go ahead and click on your fluid container there, and don't be afraid to bring this resolution up. Right now I could do like a 40, 80, 40. All right, and that kind of maintains the ratio consistency is what I have for my size down here. So I could even go like 80, 120, 80. But that's going to give you a better resolution down here on your fire. But it's also going to affect the simulation a little bit. So right now you can kind of see where that gives us a little bit higher definition look. So that's cool. And let's come over here and take a look at something down here at the bottom. You can play around with your buoyancy a little bit and density scale and all sorts of stuff. And don't forget about your opacity levels and things. You could add more swirl. You can bring your temperature scale up. You can bring your fuel scale up. And, a lot of stuff to mess around with in here. It's pretty cool. So anyway, you'll notice that you do have a drop-off shape here is at cube right now. If I go ahead and say maybe set this drop-off to a sphere, I'm going to get a totally different kind of look. So I think I'll leave it on cube for a second. No, I think I'll go to sphere and maybe go back to the beginning. Take another render here. I think I'll wait until this fuel gets up here toward my emitter. And now that I have a higher resolution set, you'll notice it goes a lot slower in your playback, and that's just the way it is. Okay, so you want to kind of fine tune this and get your effect done right with low quality rendering. Save yourself some time. Okay, so it's sort of moving its way up. The heat is starting to come up here, and as that heat gets close enough to this emitter right here, this gallon of gas, it's going to supposedly it's gonna should start on fire and blow up. Okay, there it is. That's the ignition point is right there. So I'm gonna hit pause and come over here. We'll do a quick render. There you go. And look at that. Because of the ramp, because I have this color in my ramp over here, that's pretty much why it's showing up like that. I could maybe bring it down a little bit and stretch it through a little more. We'll see what happens, but you can see where that's not looking right, but what are you going to do? Maybe it is. Let's let it play through a couple more frames, and we'll do a render on that now. Okay, so we're getting there. That's working with fire. So another thing on your rendering, if you want to take a look at your render right here, there are some various quality settings for your shading. And of course this is going to take a little bit of a hit on your render time, but you can bring your shading quality up. Let's bring it up to 10 right there and do a quick render, see what happens. And in this case, I'm going to zoom in here a little bit more, because I think what we'll do is we'll take a look at let's take a look at this area right in here, and we'll do a starting render and we'll sort of go from there. I like to have this object in here. I could change the visibility of this object. You can always turn the opacity level down on the shader that you have attached to your sphere, and that'll get rid of that, which is cool. For the moment, we'll just leave it in there, but take a look at this. The quality level on your shading gives you better separation between all of your flames and such here. Now, if you were to raise your contrast level, let's just raise it up to be extreme. I'm going to go ahead and take a render. You'll notice, you can't quite see it here, but if I were in a little closer, you'll notice some aliasing and stuff. So for the most part, your contrast tolerance should just be, kind of down in the lower level. Everything's different, but take a look at that just to make sure you're not seeing it look like an artifact or something like that. And the sample method right now is adaptive jittered, and that kind of gives it some jittery, angular kind of stuff going on around the edges. If you switch that up to, say, like let's just go to uniform, and let's see here. Let's move this over to smooth. Take a render. You'll notice it's a lot different look. This is a lot softer, and it sort of has some softer burn qualities to it. So that's cool in and of itself. So for my stuff right here, I think I just want to leave it on adaptive jittered, and I think I'll just stay with linear and take a quick look there. Okay, I like that. We got lots of really good fire qualities. So okay, there you go. That's this tutorial. I'm glad you made it through it with me. There is so much to deal with here that you can play around with this all day long, all week long, and as well you should, because this is fire, and this is something that's really important. It's a crucial part of working with a 3D fluid container. So there it is, explosions and all. So All right, well, I hope you had a good time with this tutorial and you learned something, and I commend you for taking the time to watch this all the way through and to really pay attention. It's good for your brain as well as books, so read one, all right? Wisen up, and as always, just be a great person every day, and, mind your manners. All right. Hey, thanks for stopping in, and we will have another one coming up in the near future. So there you go. Oh, yeah, by the way, one last thing. I don't know if I worked Lester into this. Nah, but you got to go to Lester Banks for a little bit of R&R because, he has really cool stuff. Lots of tutorials. Everything is, a lot of Maya stuff, but a lot of things about different things that you didn't even know you needed to know. Okay, so Lester finds them. He searches the internet in the deep crevices of the cyberland, all right, and finds great stuff. So check him out, bookmark him, go to lesterbanks.com. All right, so there you go. Great, we're done, and I hope you guys have a great weekend, and there you go. So hope you stop back for the next one.